The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Faster, stronger, bolder. If only he could figure out which. These things really slice like ham. See? That wasn't so hard. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Renato asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things, and he could never figure out why he'd done them. Usually, they worked out. After all, he was a hero. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because Know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? The city was burning, and there was no one to put out the fires. If somehow Zenobia survived her father and inherited his crown, what sort of empire would she be heir to? But he couldn't think about that, could he? Couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? You blinked. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? Couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? Renato hated gogglers, and it freaked him out to cut them. Renato wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Swordfish School was closed now. But he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek. How soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She vanished. And he suddenly noticed he couldn't move except his mouth. In fact,
that makes no sense. It's a trap,
shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Renato came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father. What are you doing? Asked Zenobia. Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He asked her. What kind of proof could you possibly have? She said as they landed on the next... Don't get ahead of yourself, lad. She caught up with him. Don't you think I'd know if my... The scientist at the observatory had a true witness to one of the Emperor's blasphemous rituals. The dead could be made to speak for a short while. Interestingly, they could not be made to lie. After all, what do they have to lose or gain by lying? Renato was no physicist, but he could have sworn something was wrong with the trajectory of these cannonballs. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The ravens had burned the reanimated witness to cinders. Renato was stunned. There goes my proof. These were scientists, not rebels, Zenobia said, upset. Why would he do this? I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him. Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first. But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. Why was he going to meet up with her? Wasn't it more important to rescue the Rebel Council from the almost certain Imperial attack? Why was he in this war anyway? Was it really to fight the good fight, or did he... Was it true? Was he on this adventure just to see Zenobia again? The Imperial heir was not an easy cat to see. Well, she'd ignored all his Kwanzaa gifts. And on the other paw, Trying to get a date by joining a war against your intended was, let's say, pretty optimistic. Yeah, but on the back paw, thought Renato. Yes, it sounded exactly like him. Good. I'm so glad we had this little chat, he told himself. There were a lot of dead ravens along the side of the road. Someone had rampaged through here on a killing spree. What had Zenobia gone to get? He had a chilling feeling it was the Iblis stone. Zenobia was level-headed. Stone would make anyone bloodthirsty. He could tell her style from the blade work on the dead bird.
I hear black is the new dead.
He reached the summit, expecting no one. But there she was, steaming, pacing.
I'm gonna kill him, she said. I'm gonna kill all his ravens, and then him, and then his family, and all their eggs and tadpoles. Then I'm gonna burn down their pond.
Did you go and get the Iblis stone?
Do you see all these ravens I killed? So much power.
Yeah. Great, Bernardo said.
You really want power from a demonic rock? You want the stone, don't you?
Not really.
Good. I'd rather not have to kill you.
He told her he loved her, that he wouldn't let the Iblis stone take her, even if he had to die for it. Well, he planned to tell her. Now didn't seem like the right time. She'd probably cool off in a bit. So he let her get in her ship and fly off. He rushed back to the Farfarer and followed her, keeping a healthy distance. Zenobia's ship was just visible through the clouds ahead. How could he reason with her? But he had to. The rebels were down for the count. No wonder. He'd betrayed the location of their base and then he'd abandoned them. And if she became Empress while she was in the grip of the Iblis stone, if she became Empress by murdering her father, she could still be a great Empress. But she could also be a nightmare Empress. She had to be stopped. There were more dead ravens along his path, some of them wounded in the back. He knew she could have easily talked her way past them, or clouded the little tiny raven brains with a spell. She was going out of her way to kill everything in her path. This wasn't Zenobia, not as he knew her. There it was again. The back door to the portal that went to the center of the fleet. So, his beloved was possessed by the spirit of a demon. That's what it meant to be a hero. To brave the darkness in your loved one's soul. To have faith there was still good in her. To help her out of that darkness, no matter what the cost. But what? What could he do? She'd kill him if he tried to take the Iblis stone from her.
Now you're foxed.
At the end of the trail of raven corpses was Zenobia. Her father was frantically rigging a strange apparatus wrapped around a glowing core. "Don't do it!" he shouted. "You'll hate yourself in the morning." "Stay back!" she screamed in a horrible voice he'd never heard before. It froze him in his tracks. The Emperor stared at him. "Run," he told the toad, "or hop." But he didn't manage to voice it, only think it. Zenobia stabbed her blade forward, and His Majesty fell dead. She began laughing hysterically. Or was she weeping? "Just walk away," she laughed at him. "I've no more use for you." There was something he needed to do, but he couldn't figure out what it was. So he did as he was told. As he walked away, he felt a chill in the world. The light in the sky seemed to dim. He didn't dare turn. He had a nagging feeling there was something he should have done just then. Something heroic. But he could not have taken the Iblis stone from her by force, and she would not have parted with it willingly. A cold wind blew from where she had been, but he still didn't dare turn. And then, an awful laughter filled the air, and all the torches and all the ships went out, and he realized what he should have done. But by then, it was too late to do anything. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Renato wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renato felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it?
say goodnight.
The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the lost gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Should have died a pirate, he thought.
Do old ravens go grey? You know what? Don't worry about it. Please?
Renato chuckled. It was the same puzzle. He wished he had his friends here, so he could amaze them. There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, There was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Doubt sunk in before he was even out of sight of the Farfarer. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? It was the sort of path he'd always avoided. The path of responsibility, of seriousness. Had he grown up? He didn't feel grown up. He'd made this decision from his gut, like he always did. Somehow, he'd impulsively decided to stop being impulsive. Did that make any sense? There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest, the mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry too. This was an unhealthy place to be. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark art, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. Maybe Lapino wasn't such a good friend. Yeah, that made him feel better. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Renato had never been much of a student. At Swordfu school, he'd never read the books, just looked at the pictures. And Zenobia. But weapons he understood. His gut told him that the Skyripper would work great. He would use it to take out the Imperial outpost. And what's the worst that could happen? The thing wouldn't work, and then he'd take it to the scientists, right? Renato actually could think of a few things that were worse. But he would make sure they didn't happen this time. Right? Exactly. As he set out down the path, Renato wondered why the parts of the Skyripper had only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had discarded it. This Emperor, Isengrim III, had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Perhaps that was bringing up lost artifacts. How perfect, then, that the Skyripper would reappear to be his destruction. And, hopefully this time, just his destruction.
You guys ever eat fresh food? He doesn't smell like it.
He was tired of slaughtering ravens. Maybe it was time to test out the new weapon. He turned a knob on the Skyripper. It made strange, mechanical noises. The wheels spun faster. It began to hum. The Sky Ripper had been built by the Transcendent Emperor. To figure it out, he just had to think like a legendary demigod. That actually wasn't as helpful as it sounded. The Sky Ripper was making a whining noise now, and its wheels were spinning so fast he could no longer see them. Bernardo had a thought. "Please?" he asked. The Sky Ripper began to glow. Boom! The outpost burst into flame. Ravens flapped out screaming, wings on fire. The base was his. The far speaker toad came hopping out.
Bernardo!
It croaked, sounding like a toad version of Zenobia.
Don't use the Sky Ripper. It will destroy the world.
"Yeah, sure it will," cracked Renato. "Pull the other one."
If you don't trust me, go see Calaveras.
That sounded sensible. Why did she always have to sound sensible all the time? Oh, it was infuriating. Of course she would say that. He was supposed to hurry and bring the Sky Ripper to the council so the rebels could actually win the war. But what if she was right? Damn it. Just this once, he would not let Zenobia get into his head with her logic and her wisdom and her appeals to reason. He was a fox. He'd go with his instincts, and it would all work out like it always did. Oh, he was sounding like a reckless idiot, even to himself. But if there was one thing Renato could never bring himself to do, it was turn back on a decision he'd made. Imperials were flapping and cawing all around the ruins. They must be panicking with rumors flying of a superweapon. Maybe they hoped to find and destroy the base before he could put the Sky Ripper into action. The Sky Ripper was whining and heating up. It would be time to use that energy soon. Kid opened the Book of Destinies. At least he'd have known about that goggler. Why hadn't Hypatia opened it? War. And this was kind of terrifying. What if they had? And what had happened had been the best future they could find. Renato had never had a super weapon before. He'd single-handedly taken down an Imperial base. He felt good. He'd resisted all the distractions that were thrown in his path. He couldn't wait to attack the enemy fleet. this was a fantastic weapon. Ravens burst into flames with just a touch of its killer beam. He was tempted to leave it on all the time, but he didn't want to accidentally slice off some council toad's head or tongue. She'd been trying to distract him. Well, this time, no one was going to distract him. Hey, why don't you guys fight in groups? Oh, I know. Because there's no I in team. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. As he headed towards the council chamber, Renato felt everyone watching him. "You've saved the rebellion," said the council speaker. "Frankly, we were afraid you'd turn aside to see that idiot Lapino." "Not bloody likely," Renato told them, feeling he was maybe being a bit harsh on the poor mad rabbit. "If you never make sacrifices," he said, "you're probably not doing the right thing." The speaker nodded. "Are you ready to lead the charge?" "Let's roll," he said, with grim satisfaction. Renato set sail for the fleet. The Sky Ripper had lost its wine. It was humming now, as if it had taken some time to seat properly. He had always been irresponsible. This time, he'd done the right thing, made the hard decisions. He was a real hero. He hadn't let himself be distracted by old friends or old lovers turned enemies. Finally, he could be proud of himself. He was ready. So was Sky Ripper. The Sky Ripper had a will of its own. It picked out its own targets and set them on fire. This was going to be a short battle. He would set the ships on fire if he didn't need them to get to the Emperor. And he wondered if he'd see Zenobia, or if she'd flee. Wouldn't she be proud of him? At least, a bit of respect. He'd become an all-conquering hero. Renato had a feeling that was the back door to something. But what? There was a parchment on a signpost. It was from her.
Every time you fire, you risk the destruction of the universe. That's insane. We surrender.
He'd done it. He'd played chicken with Zenobia and won. He could hear the horns blaring the retreat. She was wiser than he was, that was for sure. But wisdom didn't win battles.
Actually tear each other apart. Because I'm thinking name tags.
And there was Zenobia, wearing the white robes of surrender. She came and kneeled before him. Why didn't you listen to me? I was trying to save you too. You're the enemy, you said. I was never your enemy, Renato.
And he realized, not for the first time, how much she loved him.
Then she spoke a terrible word and made a gesture with her hand. She stopped moving, covered in frost, and he wondered why she'd frozen herself. Then the Sky Ripper froze, and then, for a moment, he felt very cold and discovered that he couldn't move. The next thing he knew, the sun was a giant, monstrously red. It took up half the sky, and he was in a parched red desert. And then he was on fire.
The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage.
The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters.
The Iblis Stone. It would whisper promises in his ear, offer him power.
Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis Stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? What was he doing here? Last time, the stone had fought him for possession of his own soul. Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. There had to be some way to use the Iblis Stone. It was old, wasn't it? People are so much cleverer now. And Renato was pretty sure he was cleverer than most people. The Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with Tomb Raiders.
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager. Thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once.
And he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him.
Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "What's the core?" said the stone anxiously.
But even though Renato knew how evil the gem was, he had a clever plan for dealing with it.
The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance.
The stone felt a bit clingy, and he had a feeling it did not have his best interests at heart. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Sky Ripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods. Even without its armature, the core would still possess great power.
He would go there. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Renato had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Sword Fu school together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him every secret about herself. Except the biggest one. That she was the Emperor's daughter. No. Kill Zenobia, whispered the stone. Before it's too late. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time.
You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead.
Everybody who wants to die, raise your weapon. All right.
The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. "The core will kill you." "Are you afraid of it?" "No, don't be ridiculous." It chuckled. But it's unstable. It'll poison you if I just carry it. And if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically. Renato didn't trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards.
Ooh, sparkly, thought Renato. It looked like they'd forgotten to turn off their flamethrower. Wondered if he could learn to cook this way. Probably not.
As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical. "No! It's too much power! We'll rip a hole in space and time!"
He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out.
When Renato came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light.
And it was silent. "I can't hear you," he sang out, and "Yoo-hoo!" It didn't answer. "Ha!" he said.
He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? the Farfarer sailed towards the Nexus, Bernardo wondered if the core had been created to silence the stone, or even to feed its hunger. Honestly, he didn't care. He felt terrific, and he appreciated the quiet inside his head.
The Nexus was infested with ravens, but that didn't bother Renato. With each death, the converted Iblis stone in his gauntlets glowed brighter, and he felt stronger.
Wow. He was getting a bit bloodthirsty, wasn't he? Well, he wasn't worse. He was a warrior. They're supposed to be bloodthirsty.
The core, absorbed in the stone, was doing its job perfectly.
Bernardo could feel a little eldritch jolt every time he downed a raven, but then it flowed into the glowing stone the way water flows down a riverbed. It all felt perfectly natural, as if all his life, this was what he had been meant to do.
The Nexus was a key node in the Empire's communications. From here, he could cut the ravens off from all communications with the palace.
Renato tore through the last remaining guards at the outpost like hot coffee through snow. There was a far speaker toad here. He called the council speaker. He knew she would be thrilled. And she was. She wanted him to come back to base. They had plans to discuss and a medal to give him. A large, golden medal. Great, said Renato. Let's talk about who else I can kill. Then the far speaker croaked again.
Hello, Renato,
he said.
If you get sick of slaughtering second-rate birds in the Nexus, I'm waiting for you in the mountains.
Zenobia. She missed him. She loved him. Once she saw how awesome he'd become, maybe she'd join him. They'd kiss and... Well, if she did refuse for some reason, he was no match for him now. Zenobia was taunting him. No doubt trap, well, he was nobody's sucker. Especially not hers. He carried victory in his gauntlet. He would go where the council pointed him. As he set foot on the island, Bernardo felt energized, like when he was hunting or dancing. Then he smelt it, the stench of ravens. It was a good thing he was here too, before they tripped over the secret base. He was really saving the council toad's bacon, so to speak. Bernardo had an artifact that made him practically a godlike warrior. All he had to do now was collect his medal, head for the Imperial fleet, and raise some hell.
See? Renato was a hero of the revolution. He deserved a medal. Soon, he deserved every medal they had, and hopefully one big medal ceremony in front of everybody with trumpets so everyone could know what he'd accomplished.
Everything hurt. And then it didn't. One small step for a fox, he thought. So this was what it was like to die. Not nearly as much fun as they said. The long stairs, So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. Inside the rebel base, Renato was invited to the council speaker's private chambers.
So, this is the Iblis Stone? He said. I can feel its power.
Renato told her how he had fed the core to the stone and made something even more useful than either.
Crazy like a fox,
she croaked. And Renato chuckled as if he'd never heard the joke before.
We've given you the best quarters and a bottle of Tantalonian firewater. All for you.
So they'd remembered. He woke in the morning with the sweetest of hangovers.
But the Iblis stone was gone from his gauntlet.
The corridors were empty, except for a few rebels who looked just as hungover as him. "Come on, you'll miss the battle," they yelled. Renato added sail as the Farfarer scudded across the sky. Who could have taken the Iblis stone? Was it some Imperial spy? He would find him, and kill him, and take the stone back. Renato had a bad taste in his mouth. He was killing ravens, but it wasn't fun. It felt like a chore. Oh, Renato hated chores. As a fox kid, he'd gone hungry rather than clean his room. He still didn't clean his room, he just moved house every few years. Who had the Iblis stone anyway? Up ahead, he could hear screaming and croaking and cawing. But who was winning?
The portal was heavily guarded. It must go someplace they really didn't want him to go.
Guys, everything.
As he ran forward, Renato noticed that some ravens were starting to ignore him. Just running away. Who were they running from? Some hero of the revolution? If some other so-called hero of the revolution had the stone and tried to take his victory and his medals, Renato was going to be seriously pissed off. He was the hero, not some other bozo. Renato came to the Emperor's ship. Zenobia lay dead in front of it. The ship was a wreck. Ravens lay dead, sprawled everywhere. Bloody feathers spattered across the deck and the dock. The council speaker came out. She was waving a sword around like a flag. "Look at me, Renato!" She croaked. The Iblis stone on the sword was black as coal. "Now I will be Empress, and all shall tremble before me," she croaked. So the stone had her. It was in her brain, whining for blood. "I'm afraid I can't allow that," said Renato, and moved to fight her. Toads are not usually good with swords. Something about the footwork. And the council speaker was not even a warrior. She was always tripping over things, which is quite an impressive achievement when you're a toad. Yet somehow, she was pressing Renato backwards as he desperately tried to keep her sword away from his throat. "Look, why don't you keep the stone?" he asked. "You deserve it." "Blood and souls for Iblis," she croaked. "Blood and souls." She got under his guard with her sword. It was just the tip. But sometimes just the tip is enough. He could feel his soul being sucked into the stone. As he died, he felt embarrassed more than anything else. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Renato couldn't quite put his paw on when he'd realized Lapino was working for the Empire. He'd never exactly seen Lapino sending coded messages to the palace, but he was sure. The rabbit had been on too many disastrous missions where he was the only survivor, or where he accidentally missed getting on the boat. The abyss in flames. If Renato could prevent Lapino from getting back to the fleet with all the intelligence he'd probably gathered, it might be worth the trip. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lapino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lapino from at least 2 lynch mobs. he'd always felt that the rabbit resented him. Lupino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Oh, was this payback? Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice? There was still no sign of Lupino. Not a hair, not a pellet. Was he hiding in the cemetery further down the road? That didn't seem like him. Lupino would betray him. The core was dangerous. And Renato had a fleeting idea that the two ideas went together somehow. And then it was gone again. Ah, damn ideas. They never stuck around when you needed them. Bloody and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck. Now that he knew what the rabbit was, there were a few things about him that Renato didn't find so amusing anymore. You sent me an urgent message saying that you're in danger. Oh, I am. The ravens are coming. Now, I've got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky River was dangerous most. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Renato felt like a real hero, brave and smart. He told the rabbit all about the Sky Ripper's God's Eye core. "I'll go get the core while you attack Zenobia," he told the rabbit. "But wait, I've an even better idea. I'll get the core and you attack Zenobia," said the rabbit. "Right, yeah, that is better," agreed Renato. Perfect. The traitor would make sure the Emperor got the core. Now Renato just needed the Emperor to use the core. Right. Now, all Renato had to do was fight his way through Zenobia's invading troops, sneak onto her ship and into her bedroom, and kidnap her without any of her dozens of guards alerting her. Then, he would rely on her love for him to convince her how evil her father was, so she'd run away with him instead of going back to her father, who was going to blow himself up. It did sound a little risky. But Renato had a feeling it would work out somehow. It always did.
Time to die, he thought. And it was. Renato was halfway to Zenobia's encampment when Lapino showed up. He was disheveled and distraught.
They jumped us. I barely got away. Oh, they got the core.
Oh, it was all going according to plan, thought Renato. Now he just needed Zenobia on his side. Yes, that was even better. The Iblis Stone. Zenobia could get it. And then the Emperor would have to pursue them. Wait. No. The gem would corrupt anyone. Even her. That's it, he thought. Even Lapino. Even though Lapino was already a traitor. It would turn him against his secret master, the Emperor. He would try to make himself Emperor. And the Emperor would have to defend himself with the core. Boom. He was a super genius. This is terrible, Renato told the rabbit. If only I had gone for the Iblis Stone. But now it's lost in enemy territory. He handed Lapino a map. It gives the bearer so much power. We can only hope the Emperor never finds it. What was that? Said Lapino. I think someone's following us. Anything? Rabbit ears. You go on ahead. I'll check it out. And with that, Lapino hopped off with the map. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. She was curled up on her bed. He'd forgotten how beautiful she was, how sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She was made of smoke, and he noticed he had a very solid blade to his throat. Did you really think you could capture me? Heard a familiar voice. I just wanted to chat, said Renato. Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He needs a sacrifice, someone who truly loves him, to make a bargain with the lost gods. That's a vicious lie. He wants to bring them back. That's crazy. Why would anyone? They could make him immortal, an eater of souls. And with that, her eyes widened. She understood. Renato told her how he had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred, how he had slept in a burnt village. At midnight, the Emperor's victims had come to him in his dreams to tell him of the hideous eldritch rituals they'd been sacrificed in. He could still see those kittens and puppies, their wide, sad eyes, their moist noses. You can't prove that. I've got a witness at the observatory. He couldn't tell her, not yet, why he was really here. Don't you think I'd know if my father started practicing black magic? Why? How far exactly did these things travel? The rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Renato had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had taken special care to burn the reanimated witness to cinders. Zenobia stared at the car. So, Renato explained his brilliant gambit. Sending Lapino to get the Iblastone, become super powerful and corrupted, provoke the Emperor into using the core against him, thus blowing up both of them, and hopefully the fleet too. "Let me visit your council," she said, shaken. "I want to help." Could he really trust her? He'd done it. He'd made Zenobia see how evil her father really was. He wished she didn't feel this urge to join in the rebellion. After all, he'd taken care of the Emperor, right? What had Zenobia gone off to do? What was more important than meeting the rebel council? Had he made a mistake, sending her to the ruins? No. He knew they could trust each other. He could trust her because she never broke her word. And she could trust him because she could see right through him. Well, she'd probably be there well before him. She at least had to fight her way through rainstorms of ravens. As he came around the bend, there was Lupino, unconscious on the side of the path. And Renato could smell a familiar, sweet, smoky scent. Who? Zenobia. It had to be. She never used a combat spell when she could use drowsy gas. That meant she had the Iblis Stone. What would it do to her? She hated her father now. She'd kill him for sure. The council wouldn't mind if she killed the Emperor, but murdering her father would destroy her. He had to get to whatever ledge she was on and talk her down from it. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
than he ever had. But about what? Everyone in the council chamber was dead. Zenobia stood shivering in the courtyard, drenched in blood. Why? He managed. They started arguing with me. I lost my temper and I wanted their blood. Well, not me. The stone did. Why did you take it from Lupino? I had a plan. You had a stupid plan, she said. I'm going to go kill my father now. No, you can't. You'll just take his place. You'll become worse than him. Get out of my way, or I'll kill you too. You won't kill me, he said. And I won't let you kill the Emperor. Enraged, she raised the sword. You hate him too? He could sense the Iblis stone, yearning for his death. But she didn't strike. If you kill him, he'll destroy you. The Empire had seized his ship. They'd have to take it back.
That led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. Zenobia was in no shape to fight, but he never fought so well. He wasn't fighting for money or loot or a cause. He was fighting for her, for them. His sword danced, his feet flew, and the ravens recoiled from his ferocity.
Say hi to gravity for me.
There it was, his beautiful skycraft, the Farfarer. They would fare very far indeed, beyond the Empire, beyond the reach of the Empire, to the mystical island of Avalon. He didn't know exactly where it was, but he knew he could find it, and they would find it. But they did not go unnoticed. Scout ships lifted off, and a long lance of the Imperial flagship. Bernardo turned downwind to gain speed. The Raven ships could pursue, but they couldn't close. The Farspeaker croaked,
You return her and live!
Go sacrifice yourself, yelled Bernardo.
Then you won't have her either.
On the flagship, the Emperor was readying some arcane weapon. It couldn't be. It was the core. A devastating beam lanced out of the flagship. Bernardo zigzagged wildly to keep the Farfair out of it. Now the Raven scout ships were closing the distance, and the beam was getting closer too. Then came a blinding flash, and the air was searingly hot all around him. There was a thunderous, deafening roar. He could smell burnt oak and burnt feathers and burnt flesh. But when he could hear and see again, they were alive and unhurt. And they were alone in the sky. Zenobia embraced him. They had done it. Through luck and through love, they had won the war. Avalon, here we come, he said as he held her arms wide in the prow of the boat and let her feel its speed. Maybe the real Avalon is wherever we're together, she said. And so, after a bit of an argument, Bernardo and Zenobia went to one of the two Avalons. The one shrouded in mists, or the one in their hearts. But which one they went to, I'll never tell. He'd done it. He'd forged his own destiny. Well, he hadn't actually done it. But he knew what he would do. Bernardo smiled at the book. He practically wanted to kiss it. The kid's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. He'd saved the book and saved the world. Bernardo owed him and his mother so much. Bernardo lowered the mainsail and let the Farfarer shoot forward in the breeze. Second star to the right, and straight on till morning. This time, he would win.